Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am an executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence, rather through comprehensive transformation. Guys, we got a great conversation for you. We're talking about uncovering the core, and the title of this broadcast is the duality of success. And I've got a couple of points I'm going to be talking to or sharing with you. It's going to be a great conversation. I've been just kind of out of the loop for a little bit. I have not been feeling well, but here I am back, trying to get back in the saddle here. But nevertheless, we got a great show for you. Once again, I am an executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence through comprehensive transformation rather than quick fixes. So, as an executive coach, I've worked with hundreds of men, literally hundreds of men, guys, and helping them solve problems. And one of the problems that we are talking about today is uncovering the core. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But for now, we're going to share with you a discussion or just a conversation, the duality of success. And in working with high achieving men, one of the challenges that I often deal with in working with these men, great men, to begin with. Let's get that out there. Most of them are great men, and they mean well. And oftentimes the challenge, and I shared this on the broadcast before, the challenge is that they are so caught up in their success and achieving that oftentimes they forsaken relationships, unfortunately. And relationships, as difficult as they may be sometimes, they in fact are the foundation of life. Essentially, relationships are important. And again, as difficult as they may be, it can be a challenge. And for most of us as high achieving men, that is where we oftentimes kind of fall away. And what I've discovered a lot of times in working with high achieving men is that they're so focused on their career. They're so focused on their career. And again, there's nothing wrong with being focused on your career. Absolutely not. But for a lot of times with high achieving men, they have not. Their challenge is the relationship piece of it. And so because their challenge is the relationship piece of it, they will forego the relationship piece of it, at least on a personal level. And just kind of get their heads caught up into their careers and being a success in that way. So Jailer, thank you for joining. Jailer Bot and Agent, guys, if I forget to acknowledge you, please don't charge it to my heart. Sometimes I get carried away in this topic here, in this discussion here that we're going to be having, and oftentimes I forget to acknowledge you. So it's not by mistake that I'm forgetting to acknowledge you. So again, thank you for being part of the conversation. Really appreciate you. So we're talking about the duality of success. As I mentioned, a lot of times for men, for high achieving men, the men that I'm working with, just kind of my niche is that oftentimes these men will forego relationships for the sake of pursuing their careers. And it's not because they're very successful, and this is a great thing. And obviously, I know success is subjective, but for these men, it is a goal for them. But a lot of times, they're so immersed in that goal and achieving that goal because the relationship piece of life isn't working out. And so sometimes, or a lot of times, their relationships can appear to be shallow because they have forsaken or foregone those relationships, those personal relationships. And we know that even in their workspace, there are the professional relationships, yes. But as I mentioned on the last broadcast, oftentimes when working with high achieving men, their goal is to be success. But again, oftentimes in being a success, they will forego or forsaken their relationships on a personal level to achieve that success, because relationships, let's face it, relationships are difficult. And it does not mean that you can't have great relationships, but it does mean that there's a part of us, a lot of times as high achieving men, again, we will forego the relationship in lieu of that career, because oftentimes the career goals, the concept of building a career and putting those things together, oftentimes those things are cut and dry for us. So guys, thank you, Mozart KP, thank you for joining, appreciate you. But oftentimes for those of us who are high achieving men, those things are in front of us. They are cut and dry. We know what we need to do, and we'll set forth to accomplish those goals. But when you get to relationships, let's face it, gentlemen, relationships are not always cut and dry, because you're dealing with all kinds of different variables, to including ourselves as part of that equation. Again, making that variable much, much more varying, if you will. So it does become difficult to have relationships. Again, they're not impossible, guys, but it does take work. So again, we're talking about the duality of success. And I think there is a duality in success. And there's I'm reminded of a scripture in the Bible that says, no man can serve two masters, except he will love one and hate the other. And oftentimes for us as achieving men, that master, or we have not mastered relationships. And so again, we end up pursuing our goals, our careers, as the kings, so to speak. You know, we are committed to that career, committed to those goals and success. But the relationship piece of it, we often forego the relationships for, again, in lieu of. Relationships are difficult. And so because we have not mastered that, that's one thing in our minds, for as far as high achieving men, we have not mastered that. And it becomes very difficult to master those relationships, especially with so many different variables. So again, we're talking about the duality of success. I've got some notes here that I've taken the liberty to write down. So first, I want to talk about the importance of knowing thyself. One of the biggest things that I guess more so lately, I've been really just drawn to the fact that a lot of us as men are lonely. And I too, some years ago, had gone through that lonely piece many, many years ago in my 20s, my early mid 20s, that lonely piece of it. And I do get it. I understand it. I can absolutely wrap my mind around it. I know what it feels like. I've been there. So I just kind of get that off my chest to let you know, if that's where you're at, I know exactly where you're at. I understand it. I get it. Obviously, our situations can be different. I understand it as well. But just to let you know that that's why we're having this conversation, because I've been really drawn to that. I love working with men, and I've been really drawn to that lonely piece that a lot of us are as men that are dealing with. So it's not just the young men that are dealing with the loneliness, it's the older men, around my age. I'm 57 years old, and there are men who are older or somewhere in between who are dealing with loneliness. So it does become important to understand, one of my first points is to know thyself. And in actuality, for a lot of us as men, as people in general, I think that we're in fear of the self. We fear self. We fear knowing who we are. And because we fear, there's that slightedness, if you will. We fear knowing ourselves. And when we're pushed to, when our buttons are pushed, so to speak, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I apologize. When we're pushed to, when our buttons are pushed, so to speak, it can be very, very difficult for us to especially in the way of anger. It can be very difficult for us to draw back on that and pull back on that and curb that appetite, or at least when our buttons are pushed. And oftentimes we don't know when we are who we are until the very buttons have been pushed. And this is a lot of times for a lot of us as men, those buttons have absolutely been pushed, but we feel awkward. We feel out of place, out of character, completely out of character when those buttons are pushed, where they're having to deal with anger. I too, as a man, have dealt with anger, so I get it. I absolutely get it when those buttons are pushed. Sometimes for me, when I've dealt with the anger, or in the past when I've dealt with the anger, and periodically it will rear its ugly head up at times, but sometimes in dealing with the anger for myself personally, guys, I get to a place where it's like it can be hard to stop me, and I have to come to my senses at some point. But nevertheless, the point I'm making here is that it is important to know thyself. And what happens for us as men, a lot of times we fear ourselves, because when those buttons are pushed, guys, when those buttons have been pressed by family members, by loved ones, through personal relationships, or even through professional relationships, or through business relationships. But when those buttons have been pushed, and it doesn't necessarily have to be anger. It can just be our overall attitude. And that when those buttons are pushed, we in fact find it difficult to open that door or permit people in that space. And so what happens is that we keep people at a distance. We keep people at a distance for, in lieu of allowing someone to press those buttons. And so what happens is that when we don't know ourselves in the space of being tried, so to speak, I'll put it that way. When we don't know ourselves in the space of being tried, in the space of being where situations have gotten on our last nerves, or just being even tempted with something. When we don't know ourselves in those spaces, we can find ourselves taking up the short end of life, not fully living life. Because coming into the space of knowing thyself, we need to know those boundaries. We need to be able to touch those spaces and eventually overcome those areas. So I'm sharing this with you, not to say that I've conquered and mastered everything. Absolutely not. But what's important is that I'm here to talk about it. And that's why I'm here having this conversation. I do have a program that I've got that's completely free. I want to share that with you in just a little bit, but I want to dive more into this conversation here, that is the duality of success. Our first point is knowing thyself. And again, the challenges that we as men deal with is that we're in ways fear of ourselves. We're fearful of knowing ourselves, knowing thyself. And one of the bigger reasons is because we spend so much time looking outside of ourselves, fixing this and achieving success, building up someone else's idea of success. Yes, we might be able to partake in that success, but we can ideally fill a void for someone else, so to speak, to the point where we don't know ourselves in those trying situations. It does not mean that life is not going to be trying, or we're not going to deal with different challenges. It does not mean that we're not going to deal with those challenges as we are helping someone else build their empire. So whether you're helping someone else build their empire or you're building your own empire, You're absolutely going to go through life and have those challenges. You're going to deal with anger. You're going to deal with a host of different things. Host of different feelings are going to come up. But here's what we do often as men. Again, that's why a lot of times we are reluctant to build on relationships. So we begin to pursue those things in the way of our careers, in the way of our job, or in a way of obtaining success. And we leave the relationships behind because relationships take time. You have to know yourself first. Know thyself. You have to know thyself first. And again, it does not mean that relationships are impossible, but it is important to know thyself, to experience this person here, to experience you, to know who you are in the midst of the storms that show up in life. How do you respond? And let's just, for the sake of illustration, let's just take this fantastic machine that's been built, that's been created. Obviously, we're not machines, but just for the sake of an example here, let's say you have created this wonderful machine, and you are touting that this machine does this machine does this, and this machine does this. And there's so many benefits to why you should purchase this machine, so many advantages to having this machine. But if you have not tested the machine in certain environments and certain situations, now let's place ourselves, obviously not as the machine, but if you have not accepted the test that life has handed us, if you have not accepted the challenges, and I know it's not hard, it's hard not to take the challenges that life brings us. It's hard not to take them as being personal. Because in truth, that's what I tell a lot of the clients that I've dealt with, the male clients that I've dealt with, is that what you're going through is not personal. It's never personal. And it can be a fine line in separating the two. Yes, I get it. It can be a fine line separating the two. But understand that what life and its mysterious yet knowing and not knowing, and one day we understand, and the next day we don't understand. Life is like a roller coaster, but in all of that, life is trying to get us something. Life is trying to get us to the prize. And often getting to the prize means that you've got to be tested. You've got to go through some things. And oftentimes the challenge for us, not only as men, but people, we will go to the doctor when we're dealing with discomfort. Maybe not all of us, but sometimes the challenges that we're going through will put us in a place where our body begins to ache and go through different things, and it's just relationship stuff. Having to relate to life, let alone a person, a real person, having to put the puzzle together in life is challenging in itself sometimes. But for the course that you're on as a high achieving man, and for the course most of us are on, life has a way of taking us through things Life has a way of putting the pressure on us. Because rest assured, as difficult as the pressure might be for whatever situation you might be dealing with, as difficult as it may be, and handling the pressure, the burden that's placed on each of us. Without the burden, you'll never, as a man, become the man that you are meant to be. Without the pressure that I've dealt with in life, you can't be made into the person that you are desiring to be without the pressure, gentlemen. Without that hard pressure, whether you lost someone in life, lost someone, a loved one, whether you lost a parent, a girlfriend, a child, a wife, someone was really close to you. Those are the kind of pressures that life places on every last one of us. If not now, sometime later. If it doesn't get you now, it'll get you at some point. And this is not about doom and gloom, but it is to understand the pressure is needed in order for us to experience all that life has to offer us. This is about relationships. So whether you are in a relationship with someone on a personal level, through a business relationship, a professional relationship, this is just kind of dropped in my heart now, is that whether you're in a personal relationship or in a professional relationship, having to relate in life in itself alone, separate from building a personal relationship with someone or professional relationship with someone, is relationships. So you're going to be in a relationship whether you like it or not. That's the point I'm trying to make. You're going to be in a relationship whether you like it or not. You're going to have to learn how to relate to people. Because here's the thing. If you're not relating to people, if you're not relating to yourself, you're not relating to people. If you are a foreigner to yourself, if you are in fear of yourself, and again, when I say fear of yourself, let me explain. Or fear of self, knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing the person under the test, knowing the person who is going through certain extremes in life, and that these extremes in life are absolutely necessary in order for you and I to get to know who we are. The tests are absolutely important. The tests are what make strong men. The tests are what make men who are relatable. The tests are what make men to be great leaders. And without the test, you can't even leave your own self out of a paper bag without the test. Without the test, you become useless to this world. Useless to your own situation. Useless to figuring out your own stuff. How do I get out of this jam? Without the test. You can't have success. And I know success is subjective. But you can't have a measure of success. You can have a measure of success. But I'm a man just like most of you are men who are watching, who are listening in. And in most cases, my desires may not be too different from yours. I'm not just selling for the Volkswagen or the or whatever. I'm not just settling for something small. And I know for most of you, you're not. You want the finer things in life. And there's nothing wrong with having the finer things in life. Nothing wrong with having the finer things in life. But oftentimes in getting to that place where you have achieved so much success, and you are in fact, as a high achieving man, you in fact are experiencing the finer things in life right now. You're at the top of the summit. In most cases, the men that I work with, very successful men, at the top of their game, at the top of the summit. Now, the challenge for a lot of them, I would say a good 90% of them, the challenge for a good 90% of them is, what next, Curtis? I've achieved all of this, Curtis, but what next? Why do I still feel empty, Curtis? That's the niche of men that I work with, is high achieving men. They have reached the top of the summit. They've got several houses, property, cars, more money than God almost. And they're saying, what next, Curtis? And perhaps that's you that are saying, what next, Curtis? Relationships. Relationships are always in, guys. That's part of the challenge that a lot of the men that I'm working with, and the niche and the group of men I'm working with, that's one of the biggest challenges that they have, is relationships. As I mentioned earlier, they will forego the relationships in lieu of their careers. Because as I mentioned earlier, relationships are not easy, guys. They're not. But I could tell you, if as men we're not able to relate to ourselves, and I'll say this, I said this earlier. Now, regardless of what your job might be, or however difficult, or whatever the steps it takes to complete your job, or the task you've been given throughout your workday, oftentimes when those things are placed before us as men or as people, we know what is expected of us to a degree. Those things are concrete. We can say, hey, I've got a to-do list, or my boss has said this is what needs to be done. Or if you're in a place where, as a high achieving man, you're giving orders, you're the boss. Nevertheless, you still got some kind of list or still something that you're operating by, or just things that need to be done. And the challenge is that, again, those things we know. But for the relationship piece of it, it offers too many variables. Perhaps as a high achieving man, you've dealt with abuse. Some kind of abuse, be it sexual. I guess on YouTube we have to, not YouTube, but TikTok, we can't say that word, but nevertheless, be it physical, mental, verbal abuse from a parent, from a past relationship that has made you feel insecure as a man. You, again, very successful at the top of the summit. But relationships, as I said earlier, they're not easy, guys. And I know that I'm not telling most of you anything new. They're not easy. But they're not impossible either. Most of what hinges on the relationships is knowing thyself. Knowing thyself in the way of extending ourselves to other people and the service of other people is a good 90% of it. You're more than halfway there when you get to know thyself. But when we don't know ourselves, what happens? We operate in a space of inauthenticity. We're not authentic. And that's what most of the men are desiring. Most of the men that I'm working with, again, as I mentioned earlier, a good 90% of the men that I've worked with, they've reached the top of that mountain, the summit, so to speak. They've got houses, cars, women. They can pick who they want to date, so to speak. They've got enough money to do whatever they want to do. But these men still are asking, what next, Curtis? And as I just stated, 90% of what the men are dealing with is not knowing thyself. This is the 90%, gentlemen. You are the 90%. You are the key, gentlemen. You are the key to having successful relationships, to building great relationships, to becoming a great leader. You are the key. But if you don't know how to unlock the door, because of things that may have come up in the past, be it some kind of abuse, be it sexual or physical or mental or verbal, whether you dealt with a parent, your father, your mother, or just a past relationship with in a personal relationship. Maybe you dealt with abuse from a former boss. And now as a successful man, it has you on the fence about building relationships with people. Relationships with people, that's going to be the fulfillment. That is where most of these men are missing. That is what they're missing. And again, oftentimes, because a lot of high achieving men don't know thyself. They know the product that they're building. They know the business that they're in, like the back of their hand. They got the language down pat. They got the moves and all the, they know what to say. But when it comes to relationships, oftentimes they don't know what to say. You may be asking, well, Curtis, what prevents them from having these relationships? I just shared the answer with you. Oftentimes, what prevents us from entering into relationships and building upon those relationships, having to go through the tough times. So, as I mentioned earlier, the tough times are absolutely essential. The tough times that we will go through in relationships, again, the misunderstandings through relationships oftentimes. We have to remember we've got culture plays a big part of it. Even if you come from the same family, even if you are the same nationality, culture plays a big part of it. Our past plays a big part of our success in relationships. And so again, the question, if on the table, how do I get past this? It's relationships. Get to know thyself here. One of the other things, when we don't know ourselves, when we don't know thyself, we have a tendency to operate in passivity. We can be passive men because we're walking in an area, we're experiencing an area or part of our lives where we don't know ourselves. And so we're walking and we're dealing with people in a space where we're apprehensive. And that apprehension that in how we deal with people, it doesn't show up as a qualifier to, hey, this person is successful. Again, successful in a way of our careers and what we may have acquired. But because a lot of us as men, again, high achieving men, we may have achieved success on, again, in a way of our careers, the things that we've acquired. But we're lacking in the way of relationships. And because we're lacking in the way of relationships, what happens is there's apprehension. And that apprehension can look like passivity. That apprehension not only can look like passivity, but it can also look like we're walking a tightrope, so to speak, having to balance, be careful, so to speak, walking on eggshells because we're walking or dealing with an area where we're not familiar with. And most of us know that in a way of understanding something, whatever that might be, understanding how a machine works, understanding your manual or procedures manual on the job, you've got to spend time with it. You've got to become familiar with it. And the more time you spend with it, the more you become familiar with it. No different from a relationship. But if you haven't spent time with it, the chances are that you'll be feeling like you're walking a tightrope, having to balance what you know, what's concrete is your success. That's the known factor. That is the known variable. It's not necessarily a variable anymore, but that is the known factor. But the unknown factor is you're unfamiliar with relationships. You're unfamiliar with thyself. And because we're unfamiliar with thyself, it can appear like there's a balancing act. And so what happens is that we have a tendency, again, even in the midst of a relationship, for those men who are high achieving men, we have a tendency to talk about our success here in the way of business, in our career, and be shallow, be inexperienced in the way of building relationships with people, because we don't know thyself. From one person to the next person, ladies and gentlemen, whoever's listening, there's not a huge difference. Yes, there's difference in culture, obviously. We may express ourselves differently, but when we get down to the crux of what needs to be said or what we're dealing with, most of us, we all have the same desires. We express those things differently according to our culture, according to our own experiences or their lack of. We express those things differently. But when you move the culture stuff out of the way, we all have the same basic needs. We all have the same basic needs. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Maslow's theory, I believe that's what it's called, Maslow's theory. I actually did a conversation on that some years ago. But yeah, we have that, we have the same basic needs, guys. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, or where you come from, what part of the world you come from. We all have the same basic needs, although we may express those needs differently because of our experiences. And this is interesting because it's like the principle of something. It doesn't matter what you may build on top of it. It doesn't matter how you may express it or even share the story, whether over a campfire or whether through, as a father, you and your son are rebuilding a motor and you're sharing certain wisdoms with him. It doesn't matter what you build on top. The principle remains the same, ladies and gentlemen. We may and will share stories differently. But when you understand the principle that the same basic needs we all have, we all share those same basic needs. And when the needs are not met, we have a tendency to overcompensate in another area of our lives. When the basic needs, or when certain needs are met, or not met, I should say, when certain needs, basic needs are not met, we'll overcompensate in other areas. Much like in the example I've just shared with you, in a way of the gentleman trying to have a relationship. The woman wants to engage in a, conversation, and where are we going to be at in 5 years? Where do you see yourself at? Not necessarily in your career, your expanding your success, no, but as a person. And as high achieving men, a lot of times, again, and this is just a people thing, but when we are short in one area, we'll overcompensate in another area. We may even feel shame or inadequate about having certain discussions because that's an untapped area. We're not familiar with that space. Most of what we need to know about people is through our own selves, ladies and gentlemen. Most of what we need to know about people, be it man or woman. Women are different, for sure. But ideally, the desires, the again, it's not even a matter of why a person did something or why they said it. At the base of that, or again, the foundation of that, are the basic desires that we all have. And from one woman to another woman, they're not that different, ladies and gentlemen. And so that's why it's so important for us men to know thyself. To know thyself. You can step out of that place of being passive as a man when you know thyself. I'm not talking about just wearing all your richest jewelry or whatever the case might be, your homes and cars. No, I'm saying having a conversation with a person, being able to relate to life, people in life. Because what happens and I want to talk more about this, but let me share something with you. I do have an event that's taking place, and that's going to give absolutely more clarity to what I'm sharing with you here. Again, for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into go into what I'll be sharing with you during the event. But I'm just kind of just sharing some different pieces of the conversation, but not in its entirety. But nevertheless, we do have an event that's taking place on December the 9th. So if you are still here and enjoying the conversation, and you are a high achieving man, or you know a high achieving man who can use this information, check out the link on the screen. Uncovering the Core: Your Path from Success to Significance, guys. Check it out there. Again, it's on the screen there. Uncovering the Core: Your Path from Success to Significance. The link there is also on your screen. bit.ly/60-minute journey. And that's all it's going to take, is a 60-minute journey, a discussion that we'll have. We'll make room for a Q&A at the end of the discussion. Again, this conversation is for men only, those men who are at the top of that summit, and you're asking, what now? What now? And again, 90% of the men that I'm working with, that is the question. High achieving men, they've got more than enough, abundance and excess of all kinds of different things. But they too get to a place where, in most cases, again, 90% of the men are asking, what now, Curtis? What next? And because of that, in most cases, the men are feeling invisible. And that's the crux of it. The men are feeling invisible because not because they're not because there's anything wrong with them. No, that's not what I'm saying. Not because there's anything wrong with them. It's because relationships, unfortunately, they have forsaken their relationships and forged ahead to building their careers. And at the end of the day, guys, we're made to make connections with people. We're made to make connections with people. God designed it this way. And I know people can get on our nerves. Absolutely. I can be the first to tell you, yes, people can get on my nerves too. Absolutely. But the reality of it is that relationships are important. And again, if we are not relating to ourselves, as high achieving men, again, fear of self, and there is actually a phobia for that. I don't know it offhand, but if I'm not mistaken, there's a scientific term for that, or psychological term for that, psychology term. But nevertheless, so the challenge in not knowing ourselves again is fear of self, and out of that fear comes a passivity that we as men can deal with. Again, strong in other areas, can build a house, can build a business, but we can find ourselves again operating from a space of passivity as it relates to relationships. And because of that passivity, I'm going to say this just kind of dropped in my heart. Because of that passivity, we as men don't have clear-cut boundaries in the way of relationships. And we can appear to be as pushovers. Again, successful in business, creating businesses, networking, know all the different conversations you should have, the things the things that you should do and you shouldn't do, the conversations, the things you should say and you shouldn't say. We got all those things down packed as high achieving men. But in the way of relationships, oftentimes, again, because we don't know thyself. Because rest assured, if you have forsaken relationships with people, you've also forsaken the relationship with thyself. I know it can be complicated, but it's really easy, guys, because you and I, we're really mirrors of each other. So if you have forsaken relationships, you first have forsaken this. You've forsaken thyself. And when you've forsaken thyself, the next thing is to forsaken people out there. And so now, as men, high achieving men, what happens is that when we get to the top of the summit, do you think there's any wonder why we feel invisible? Because we're invisible in here. If you're invisible here, it's not a wonder why a lot of high achieving men are feeling invisible out there as it relates to feeling like the world doesn't see us. The world just walks by us. That's all part of knowing thyself. Again, mentioned passivity. I also mentioned that tightrope, so to speak, that balancing act that we have to play when we don't know ourselves. Know thyself. There's a balancing act that we play. There's also lack of confidence. Again, I'm not speaking of the things that we know, the things that are concrete, the task and the task and the assignments. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not talking about the task and the assignments that we are aware of, that things that need to be done on a day-to-day basis on our jobs, in completing the task within our careers. Those things are known. I'm not talking about that. But aside from that, it can be a lack of confidence in the way of relationships. Lack of confidence. And that lack of confidence, here's how it shows up. It shows up as uncertainty. It's not about, as a man beating your chest, but the lack of confidence shows up as uncertainty, meaning that you feel uncomfortable making decisions in the relationship. And so in turn, guess what happens? You end up placing a major burden on the woman. It's not to say that she's not, obviously she's dealing with her own stuff as well. Or women in general, they're dealing with their own stuff, people. But when we as men, high achieving men, have not been able to integrate those professional lives and our personal lives, when we have not come to a place where we can have integrated the two, and that the two, almost like a marriage, so to speak, that the two become one, when we have not come to a place where we have not integrated those things, the things that I've been sharing with you is what we get. We get men operating in a space of passivity. We get men feeling like they're walking the tightrope in relationships, trying to play a balancing act, and to make sure they're not feeling inadequate in that space. They start talking about stuff that's completely unrelated, because these are conversations that they can't have. They feel like they can't have or be a part of those conversations because they are unfamiliar with that area of themselves. Again, it's just my numbers. 90% of relationships are right here. For you as well. 90% of the relationships are within you, meaning that you have the key to unlock that part. And when you know thyself, you can step out of this passivity. You can walk in confidence. So I don't want to just give you the doom and gloom, but I do want for you to understand that how major this is. How major this is. When you don't know thyself, you can be easily misled. I wrote something down earlier, and here's what I wrote down. It says, fear is the absence of truth. Fear is the absence of truth. And so when we don't know thyself, we can even appear like a mystery to ourselves, let alone trying to figure out someone else. When we don't know thyself. So, and knowing thyself is taking away the mystery. And knowing ourselves is not, or making a decision to no longer partake in the deception of fooling ourselves, building something that's not going to last. When you know thyself, you can then begin to count the costs of what it takes to build that thing out. You can begin to apply your experience, your willful experience, because you're going to have to go through in order to get the experience. I'm not just saying master something. Oh yeah, I know that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're going to have to master that thing to know the feelings of rejection, to know the feelings of being abandoned, to know the feelings of losing something, to know the feelings of winning too. Winning is important. Being a success or accomplishing things are important. But do you understand that in order to accomplish something, it comes out of the pain. It comes out of the lessons learned through the rejection, through feeling like we've been abandoned in life, through feeling like we've been forgotten. The lessons give us the true success, but the true success comes with the relationships too. And when we don't know thyself, we become a target and we are easily misled. We're easily misled when we don't know ourselves. A good friend of mine, I would say that she's a friend. A good friend of mine said leadership is divine. And when she said that, it just I had to pause to hear that again. As a matter of fact, I spoke to her not long ago. I had to ask her, say, well, can you repeat that again? You said something about leadership. And I even wrote it down, but I wanted to hear her say it. Leadership is divine. I agree with that in every part and every fiber of my body. Leadership is divine. We have to be able to lead ourselves out first, ladies and gentlemen. And in order to lead ourselves out, you have to know thyself. You have to know thyself when you're being tempted. You have to know thyself under the guise of feeling abandoned or rejected, or feeling like you've been lost, or feeling like you lost something or someone. You have to know thyself in the midst of all of those different circumstances that life will sometimes inevitably place us in. You have to learn thyself, know thyself out of the abuse, whatever it may have been, sexual, physical, mental, or verbal. You have to know thyself. My life has absolutely not been perfect, but I've endeavored to learn and know thyself in the midst of it, out of it, coming out of it like a phoenix out of the ashes. You too. It's important, ladies and gentlemen. That's why so many high achieving men are feeling empty at the top of the summit. Because life is so much more than the things that we acquire. Absolutely, there's nothing wrong with acquiring these things, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. And when we get to the top of that summit, and you're asking yourself that question, because what happens a lot of times is that we can find ourselves pointing the finger at them, when in fact, we were the ones that had made the decision. Whether you made the decision spoken out loud or you spoken it to yourself. Was it something that you thought, or thoughts that kind of felt like they were ransacking your mind, if you will, overtaking you? And maybe perhaps you have the experience to solidify that decision that you've made, that says, hey, you know what, Curtis, you don't know me and I've been through some stuff. You don't know my situation. I've been through some stuff, man. Perhaps you've got all the experience that absolutely validates in your mind. It validates why you should forgo or forsaken relationships. You might be right. And you have that right. But the challenge is now, the emptiness doesn't go away by way of things, acquiring many things, acquiring another house, another car, another whatever. It doesn't go away in all that you've been acquiring. Relationships with people, relationships first and foremost with thyself, is majorly important. It's 90% of it, ladies and gentlemen. Another issue, guys, this thing here is loaded. When you don't know thyself, it's loaded. And oftentimes we'll project ourselves, those things that we're lacking, onto other people, as high achieving men, as women, as people. Those things that are lacking, we will project those things out and place them on people, saying, hey, it's you that's the problem. When in fact, sometime long ago, through the many experiences that had justified why we should not concern ourselves with building relationships, or just speaking to justifying why we should forsake relationships, And again, as I said earlier, in most cases, you're right. You could be right. I don't know you. But the reality of it is that when we have spoken certain things, spoken a vow, so to speak, whether out loud, verbally, or a thought subconsciously that we've allowed to just run rampant and begin to plant itself and bring forth roots and all that stuff and branch out and eventually the seed of those thoughts, again, justified or not, the seed of the very thoughts grow and they grow and they grow. And then we'll completely feel justified in our decision. Oh yeah, I Curtis, you don't know me. I blah, blah. We can feel completely justified in our decision to forego relationships. But you're at the top of the summit. And that's when most men come to me. That's when most men come to me. And rest assured, I promise you, and in most cases, it is a battle. Because at that point, the roots have become so deep. The vow that some men have spoken, because they feel justified in their decision to forgo relationships because of what they went through. In most cases, for many of us, what we've gone through, again, has been projected upon us from our parents and perhaps their parents and so on and so forth. It's like, I think George Carlin, God rest his soul, but George Carlin spoke of the fruitcake that's been passed around at Christmas time. You know, saying that it's the same fruitcake. But nevertheless, what happens is that our parents or their parents and perhaps their parents have projected their stuff upon their parents. And somehow now it's the fruitcake that's been placed in our hands now. It's the situation that we're dealing with now. And at some point, we have to be prepared to say, hey, you know what? This stops right now. Speaking of putting an end to this stuff that we as high achieving men are dealing with, I got an event that's taking place. I mentioned this earlier. Got an event that's taking place on December the 9th at 6 p.m. Central Time. It's called Uncovering the Core: Your Path from Success to Significance. The link is on the screen, bit.ly/60-minute journey. And once you visit the website, it's going to give you more information in regards to what exactly am I talking about. It's going to give you more information about the webinar. It is a free webinar. It is absolutely free webinar. I don't know if I mentioned that, but yeah, it is a free webinar. So again, we've only got room for 35 people. And I'm doing it for a reason, guys. Keeping it small. It's not a marketing thing that I'm trying to put out there. But when you're pouring this information out to the level that I'm sharing with you, it takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot out of me. This is not chicken stuff that I'm feeding you. This is those things. I've been spending time with on a more spiritual, holistic space, guys. So I've been spending a lot of time with this. This is eagle stuff. This is stuff that are definitely a higher elevation, guys. So again, when you are talking at such a level as I will be sharing with you on December the 9th at 6 p.m. Central Time, when you're having these kind of conversations, it can be very taxing, not only for me, but the retention level is important, guys. So I'm keeping the seating capacity to 35, keeping it low, just to ensure that that you are able to retain the information, because it's going to be a lot of information that's going to be shared with you. It's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to just sit with. And I think a lot of times we're as people, we're quick to challenge certain things and say, oh, no, 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 no. But I want to suggest that you sit with this, even the information that I'm sharing with you now. It's not, it can appear to be foreign. Absolutely. It can appear to be foreign. And therefore it can be a challenge to wrap our minds around some of the things I'm sharing with you. But in truth, at least the way I receive it, it's logical. It's logical. The information or the energy that we are dealing with when we have not solved our problems that we may be dealing with, or the shortcomings in life when we have not solved our own situations that, again, lacking in one area, we find ourselves overcompensating in other areas. And that problem in itself, or that thing for the reason why we're lacking, is still unresolved. It's still unresolved. And so at some point, though we're overcompensating, we can find ourselves having been in that space for overcompensating for years. And so now when it finally, when life places us in situations, and now it's time for us to deal with that thing. In most cases, for me as a executive coach, I found myself like a child, like a father, trying to take candy from a baby, because that thing that a lot of times as men that we're overcompensating for, that now becomes not only a secret place, but it becomes a place of soreness, a place of pain, something that we are embarrassed about, something that hides shame, the guilt. And it can be like taking candy from a baby. And these are grown men. It ends up being a struggle. And so oftentimes at the end of the call or the end of the conversation that I may be having with the client, I am completely exhausted at the end of that call. Feel like I had to go to take a nap and sleep for a couple of days. Because there is a cover-up that takes place, so to speak, that we as people do, not just men, but we as people do sometimes. There's a cover-up. And during that cover-up, again, we'll highlight the things that we want other people to see. But the other things that we don't want them to see, they become something that's tender. And, again, that sore spot. And we protect that thing. And the longer we protect it, the longer we protect it, the more we find ourselves, again, coming up short in relationships. Because that's the very thing that life, in fact, that's the very thing that life is after. That's the very thing that makes us whole. That's the very thing that makes us complete. The thing that we are unwilling to deal with. And so this conversation that we're going to be having again on December 9th at 6 p.m. Central Time, it is a completely free webinar, guys. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Uncovering the core, your path from success to significance, guys. Again, the link is on the screen, bit.ly/60-minute journey. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the conversation, guys. And yeah, and it's going to be good, guys. It's going to be good. You got to be vulnerable. That's going to be so important. You got to be vulnerable, guys. You got to feel this thing. It might make some tears come up. You got to feel this thing, gentlemen. It's important, gentlemen. It really is. It really is. I don't know if I'm coming across well, if you really get me, and if I'm really making sense. You got to bear. You have to be prepared to release this burden. The very thing that you think you're hiding. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, "What's done in the dark comes to the light." The very thing that you think that you're hiding. And again, it doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. But oftentimes the very thing that we have committed ourselves to hide because of the pain of growing up, or through past relationships, through our parents, abuse in different levels. The very thing that we can find ourselves trying to cover up because of the pain. It's not that we've set out to be malicious and say, "Oh, I'm going to hide this over here." No. Regardless of your intention, the very thing that's hidden, regardless of your motivation, the very thing that's hidden will come to light. And this light that I'm speaking of, meaning that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be exposed. No, it means that thing that you may have covered up, again, regardless of the intention or the motivation for why, it ends up being the silent factor for why a lot of high achieving men avoid relationships, and they make their career and their jobs their focus. They've got the cars, the houses, and accomplished so many different things. But the very thing that they have tried to secure, okay, this is mine, and they, just kind of giving to life, making a decision what they want to give to life. And yet life is trying to get the thing that you've hidden over here, because that's what's going to complete you. That's what's going to make you whole. Is getting to the core of it. Another big one here is the man who doesn't know thyself. He has trust issues. He trusts no one. The man who doesn't know thyself trusts no one. Why do you think that is? It's rhetorical, but just it goes back to he doesn't know thyself. He doesn't know himself. And when a man doesn't know himself, he doesn't know them and you and they and there, and he doesn't know them either, because he doesn't know himself. Because, as I shared with you earlier, the motivation behind, or the desire, the motivation always for each of us can be different. We can express ourselves differently, but the actual motivation, or the basic needs, as I mentioned earlier, the principle, regardless of how we build a house, everyone may build a house differently, but the principles still remain. And when you build a house under the guise of the right principles, obviously digging deep for however high or tall you want the house to be, 2 stories, 6 stories, whatever the case might be. There are certain fundamentals, principles that are key. And when you step outside of those principles of what is known to be true, or you find yourself trying to overcompensate for something that's you might feel inadequate as a man about, you've broken the rule. You've broken the rule. You're out of alignment. Because if we could look at the fundamentals or the principles, so to speak, we can look at the principles as the truth of which life exists, relationships exist. Not what we tell ourselves because we feel inadequate, but the truth. The truth. Meaning that we're having those conversations with ourselves as men. Man, I felt inadequate. I didn't feel good about that. I was insecure about that. And I know this sounds strange, but guys, I'm trying to tell you, you gotta come to that place, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. You gotta come to that place where you're feeling vulnerable about who you are. Getting to that place where you can be vulnerable. And that you can peel back the curtain. You can peel back the curtain, peel back the layers. And as I often like to say, we can come out from under the rubble of the stuff that life has placed upon all of us. We can come out from under it and begin to peel back the layers. And I guarantee you'll find out that a lot of what you will discover as we're peeling back the layers of the rubble that we're under, a lot of it. Hey, what's going on, Derek? Sit down and heal. What's going on, brother? Thanks. And all those others who have been here with me for a while. Hey, what's happening? Again, I do apologize. Hey, Mozart Woods, thanks for joining, man. Appreciate you. Coffee and several other people who have joined me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, don't charge you my heart. Sometimes I get involved with these conversations and I do forget to look at the comments and acknowledge people. But I want to say, take a moment to say thank you for being part of this conversation. But as I said earlier, is that oftentimes when we lost a train of thought here. Oftentimes when we as men we don't trust. It'll come back to me. I apologize. Lost my train of thought. But because we don't know thyself, we don't trust ourselves. And if we don't trust ourselves, we for sure are not going to trust the people, the men, the women, the children, whoever. We're not going to trust nobody. Because we don't know thyself. And 90% of who you are is in him, her, they, we, us. And when you don't understand that, you are just as a mystery to them as you are to yourself. Guys, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I hope this conversation is making sense to you. Hopefully you understand it. Hopefully I'm not talking in riddles. We've been talking about the duality of success. The duality of success. And the first part of it, and I'll just kind of do a quick recap here. I don't even know how long have I been on? Whoa, I've been on for like an hour and 24 minutes. Didn't realize that time goes by so quickly. But I'll just to do a quick recap here and we'll kind of shut it down. And I will, actually, before I shut it down, I'll give you the just some more instances of what I've shared with you earlier in regards to actually unlocking the door here. I already told you one key. I told you you're 90%. That's the first key. And that is the primary key. You are the 90% of the issues, the wins. You are the 90% of it. The challenges that we face in life, in relationships, you're 90% of it. And if we can solve those, answer those questions in here, you can also be the answer for those you will meet in life. Answer that to, or answering questions for your wife, answering questions for your son, answering questions for your team members as a leader. That's how this thing works. Is that I did say earlier that the stuff that you're going through in life, as difficult as it might be, stuff that I've gone through in life, as difficult as it might be, don't take it personal, because it's never personal. It's never personal. It's people who are going through things. And I'm not trying to justify what they're going through and say because they're going through things, they get to dump on you or dump on me or you or anyone else, or they get to project. That's what people do when they don't know thyself. They're, in essence, fearful of self. They essentially are like a mystery to themselves. And that's why relationships seem so awkward and difficult to people sometimes. Because we sometimes can be a mystery unto our own selves, and let alone trying to figure out someone else. So we've been talking about duality, the duality of success. The first thing I mentioned was know thyself. And in parentheses, fear of self. That's what prevents us from walking in true success with relationships, healthy relationships. Healing piece of it, guys. One of the key components and walking in this duality of success is passivity. Being passive as men. It's difficult for us to walk in an assuredness. It's difficult for us to make decisions. I also mentioned the tightrope, the balancing act that we play as men in this duality of success. I mentioned the lack of confidence, the uncertainty that comes with not knowing thyself, fear of self. And we can project that lack of confidence, that uncertainty. And oftentimes that uncertainty comes, especially in relationships as men, when our wives say, babe, honey, what do you think about X, Y, Z? Oh, I don't know. What do you think? Blah, 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 blah. And we're not able to make decisions because of the uncertainty in that area dealing with relationships. Whether you're married or not, or significant other, just speaking to relationships in general. Marriage constitutes as a relationship. So, again, as men, high achieving men specifically, because we don't know thyself. Again, we know the success. We know the blueprint for success because we're there. It's concrete. We get it. We've accomplished it. We can connect the dots to certain things, but as it relates to relationships, oftentimes that's where we miss the mark. We fall short. And because we can have challenges wrapping our minds around the variables, the things that are just changing. People are changing. We are changing. We often forgo those relationships and forge ahead with building our career and trying to be successful. So again, uncertainty, lack of confidence in that area. We're easily misled. I mentioned about leadership. Leadership is divine. Leadership did not come from the Kellogg Business School. They were not the first people that put leadership together. Wasn't Socrates, Plato, Aristotle? No. Leadership comes from divinity. Leadership is divine. And when a man has the leadership piece down, again, leadership is first for himself. But when a man does not know thyself, he is easily misled by those who have put whatever together, easily misled by other gurus out there that's giving you wrong information, easily misled. Because, and here's the other piece, because most men who have reached that pinnacle of success, they don't trust easy. They trust no one. They don't trust their mom, their dad, their cousin, brother, uncle, niece, nephew, sister, no one. And the reason why they don't trust anyone, I mentioned this earlier, is because they don't know thyself. And if you don't know thyself, if you can't trust you here, you can find yourself being indecisive, especially in the way of relationships. Especially in the way of personal relationships. I know I've been saying relationships, maybe sounding in a general term, but it's especially in the way of building personal relationships. We can find ourselves as high-achieving men, again, walking in that space of indecision. Can't make a decision because you don't trust. And because you don't trust, there's no confidence. And because there's no confidence, there's uncertainty. And because there's no because of uncertainty, it leads to being passive. All of these dots connect, ladies and gentlemen. They all connect. So how do we solve this? We're going to be wrapping it up in just a few minutes, guys. I've been on for quite a while. I didn't realize I was on that long. But how do we solve this? How do we get to the crux of this? What have I been saying from the very beginning? Know thyself. That's how you unlock the door. You are the key, ladies and gentlemen. And I know I work with men, but I don't know who's all listening, but you are the key. You are the key to unlocking the door for the relationship that you desire. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to be your perfect match. Absolutely not. But getting to know thyself. And I believe that is what that is what God has been trying to do for all of us. Because in most cases, we've been given this illusion, and many of us have been chasing after it, myself included. We've been chasing after it, and we've had to determine what's real and what's not real. And it's not just about getting to know thyself, but it's about, again, and absolutely very important, knowing thyself. But once you have peeled back certain layers, you begin to create boundaries, so to speak. You begin to create boundaries. And in creating those boundaries, you can't make yourself accessible to everybody, because everyone. I often like to say that these conversations that I have with the high achieving men, these are conversations not because of their success, but these are the conversations. These are the true 1%ers. And you don't necessarily have to be a high achieving man, but when you understand the concept, when you begin to heal and know thyself, relationship, it's not, here's this, I want to explain this really quick here. When you begin to know thyself, it's not just about networking with people as we may see it in the sense of high achieving men. You're successful and you know so-and-so, and you know who's the CEO over here, the CEO over here, and the CFO, the COO. You know all these people. But in fact, it's about a relationship that extends so much further than business. It extends in a way of leading your own family, leading your community, just standing up and taking your rightful place, stepping out of passivity, stepping into certainty, walking in confidence. But before we can walk in confidence, before we can walk in certainty, before we can trust other people, we got to know thyself. It is hugely important. You can't replace it with anything else, ladies and gentlemen. You can't replace it with anything else. You can't replace it with anything else. Lastly, guys, I'm going to mention this webinar, this free webinar that I've got on the 9th of December. That is at 6 p.m. Central Time. Again, that's 6 p.m. Central Time, December the 9th. That is coming up in less than a week or so. I'll place it on the screen. Here is the link. And that is the website right there. That is Uncovering the Core, Your Path from Success to Significance. The link is on the screen there, bit.ly/60-minute journey. Again, the seating capacity is limited to 35. That is, I promise you that it's not just a marketing stunt that I'm giving you, or just to create the fear of missing out. I promise you it's not. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing 35 seats, and I shared this with you earlier. The reason why I'm doing 35 seats is because at the information and the level of information that I share with you, it can be very taxing. It's very taxing because these things are, in fact, spiritual. I'm sure other people are talking about them, but I know from my experience, because of the depth of a conversation that I'll be sharing with you, it's taxing mentally and emotionally. And that's the first and foremost reason. And secondly, the other reason is that I'm keeping the seating arrangement or capacity to 35. We're keeping it small. And I didn't mention this earlier, but in fact, I probably should have had it a smaller group. But initially I wanted to start with 50 because of my mind trying to be greedy, but in reality, I said, no, I'm going to do 35 because, again, I want to keep the number small for retention purposes. Because any group bigger than 35 or 50, 100, it becomes very difficult. Because what happens is that when people enter a room, and just kind of a spiritual perspective from this, when people enter a space, or whether you're in your home, let's just say you're in your home by yourself, there is an energy that we put out. We put that energy out there. But then when we have another person who enters the room, enters that space, there is yet a different energy. And then you have more people, internet space. Let's say you've got 50 people in a home. You've got so much energy out there, and energy in itself, the motivation and the personalities, the dynamics of the energy that's out there. I'll put it that way. The dynamics of the energy, it pulls on us. It pulls on us. And it can be distraction to a lot of people, including myself, and because it pulls on us. Energy pulls on us. Interesting enough, as I'm sharing this conversation with you, looking over at the comments or the comment section, seeing how many people, it's quite a few people here. It does something for each of us a lot of times when people are involved in a conversation, people are listening, people are showing up. Versus when there's no one there, there can be a low energy level, and there's a pulling. Even as I'm sharing with this conversation with you now, there's a pulling, and even though you're not physically in the room or I can't see you, there's a pulling. There's a level of energy that's out there that's pulling on me to share this information with you, and. But nevertheless, we got this event that's taking place, uncovering the core, your path from success to significance, taking place December the 9th at 6 p.m. Central Time. I'm here located in the Houston area, so that's going to be, again, Central Standard Time. The link is on the screen, bit.ly. /60-minute journey. The conversation, the webinar is completely free, guys. So after the not so much after the webinar, but during the webinar, we'll make room for Q&A for any questions that you might have, gentlemen. And I would love to see you there. So do yourself some justice, make plans to be at this webinar, and we will say goodbye for now. I've been on for almost nearly 2 hours, just 18 minutes shy of being on for 2 hours. So if I did not acknowledge you, my apologies. Thank you, King Nova, for joining. Thank you. There's a lot of different people here. Michael Perry, Antioch Orthodox, sit down and heal. Thank you, Brother Derek. Appreciate you, man. sin.dere11. Thank you. Thank you, Kali, and thank you, Mozart Woods, if you're still here. Thank you, Betty Bristol. Thank you, Luis, Miss Reba. Thank you, Sharon C2018 2018. Thank you, everyone. So again, I really appreciate all the love, guys. Hopefully this conversation has made a lot of sense to you. It's that you understand it, and that you will apply some of the information I've shared with you, if not all. Again, I know it's been a lot of stuff I've shared with you, but nevertheless, again, thank you. Thank you all. A lot of people, guys. So again, thank you for all the love. Yeshua, Save, thank you. Thank you, Christ. Thank you, Rob Brown, or RD Brown 69. Thank you. Again, thank you all for the love. I really appreciate it. So I will say ciao for now. Let me take this off screen. And we will talk with you soon. Bye-bye for now.